Welcome to week 5 from our wireless security class. And again, this is from the textbook Wireless and Mobile Device Security from John Doherty, Chapter 6. Now, I do include quite a bit in these notes that are not in the book, as well as concepts that are in the book. Well, let's get going. And as usual, I will cut these off between 5 and 10 minutes and then just pick up in the next video when the time starts to get away from me. First, let's look at a couple of general concepts. These come from early in the chapter, where it's noted that wireless access potentially bypasses the physical access requirement for a hacker. Microsoft at one point put out something called the 10 Immutable Laws of Security, and in one of those 10 laws, they said if a bad guy has physical access to your computer, it's not your computer anymore. Well, with wireless access, even that may not be required for the hacker. Another concept that's put forth early in the book is that low-tech attacks are just as damaging as sophisticated attacks. I was recently watching the old Star Trek series, and the crew was put on a planet and given some guns from the Old West, and they made the point that those guns are just as deadly as phasers. Well, that's the concept here. All right, let's look at something called the advanced persistent threat. Now, this kind of was out of place in the book. It was sort of thrown in as an extra, but I think it is an important concept to understand. And that is just simply sort of a definition of what the advanced persistent threat means, what it is. So let's read this together. A sophisticated and sustained cyber attack where an intruder gains unauthorized access to a network and remains undetected for an extended period. And here are some of the characteristics. These are not in your book. I threw these in here separately. They are stealthy, covert. So in other words, they are designed to be undetected by the victim. They are targeted. They're not opportunistic attacks. These are highly targeted and are the result of a lot of reconnaissance prior to the attack. They are adaptable. They can adapt to defenses as those defenses occur in real time. And they are long-term. That is to say, they are persistent for sometimes months or even years of time. So these are some of the characteristics, again, not listed in your book, but I thought you might like to have these. Next is what I call the cartography of threat actors. Again, this is not in your book. There is sort of a chart that talks a little bit about skilled versus unskilled and outsiders versus insiders. But I felt that there are some other parameters that also needed to be included, and so I put those down here. Let's go through these. Let's start with skilled and unskilled attackers. First of all, skilled attackers might be more sophisticated, but unskilled attackers can be just as deadly. Outsiders versus insiders. Well, the idea here is to recognize that insiders inherently have both physical access and permissions. They already are able to log on to your network. And so they could be much more deadly than outsiders, although outsiders can be very deadly as well. Insiders just have a higher potential of being able to easily get into your network. Malicious versus non-malicious. This is one that is not often thought of by beginners because we assume that attacks are malicious, but many kinds of attacks are non-malicious. For example, consider the employee that has a network jack next to their desk, but they decide that they would like to be able to use their home laptop or their phone or wander around a little bit and be able to do things that they normally would do on their desktop computer. So they plug a wireless access point into that jack. That is a type of attack. That is a rogue device and can cause a lot of problems. They were not being malicious. In fact, they thought they were doing good, but they were not. So bear in mind that not all attacks are malicious attacks. How about targeted versus opportunistic attacks? Targeted attacks are those attacks, of course, that are targeted. I can't think of a better way to say it. Whereas opportunistic attacks just means that you have lowered the bar so much that somebody sees a hole, they see a way in, and they just take it because they see it there. Well, I can't really map all 4 of these the way that they are in the book with just 2 of them, because with a 2-page table or a 2-page chart, it's easy to make an x-axis and a y-axis and have 4 items on there. But I can't easily do this sort of 4th dimensional look at mapping it. But I thought it was important that we put all of these characteristics of attack types. In targeted attacks, we're talking about something with a reconnaissance phase. And I really want to emphasize that the reconnaissance phase of an attack is highly structured and usually a very long phase. We often see movies where, some pimply-faced kid is in the back of a van and says, "Hey, let's see if we can get through this password," or "Let's see if we can get in over here through this wireless network." And it's sort of on the fly. Well, that's not the way attacks really work. Generally, they are highly structured, and even individuals who are good hackers will tend to go through this long reconnaissance phase. So please ignore what you see in the movies and TV with those off-the-cuff types of attacks that you typically see. All right, we'll continue with point number 5 here in the next video.